Spectrum Extra on Radio 1 FM 90. An extra hour of analysis and discussion on the topical issues of the week. Brought to you by Housing Finance Bank, a financial institution regulated by Bank of Uganda. Housing Finance Bank, we make it easy.
Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
Well, a very good evening to you and welcome to this edition of Spectrum Extra, coming to you live on Radio 1 FM 90. We are live on our website, which is www.radio1fm90.com. Click on the icon with the word listen live. You can still listen to this radio station via the different radio listening apps. Tune in, Afro Mobile, your TV channel, Radio Garden and Stream Africa. Radio 1 is also live on DSTV. Our audio channel there is 897, and on Star Times, our audio channel is 97. Today being a Friday, we review the major events of the week. And today is a very special day, the International Women's Day. We will be asking a question: what's the status of women in Uganda? Well, today we join the rest of the global community to commemorate the International Women's Day. The national celebrations were at Boma Grounds in Katakwi. President Yoweri Museveni was the chief guest. The theme, accelerating gender equality through women economic empowerment. And it's derived from the global theme, which is Count Her In, accelerating gender equality through economic empowerment. So the main talking issues in this commemoration is women empowerment. So we'll be looking where we are as a country. We know women form 51.2% of the population of Uganda, which is about 24.5 million people as of last year. And we are going to go into a census. Maybe we'll be getting more accurate figures coming in there. There are so many other challenges that women face, including poverty. We have heard about that assertion that women bear the brunt of poverty. We've seen violence in different forms, especially at the domestic level. We hear about health-related challenges, women still dying while giving birth, and the children also. We are seeing issues of low education among women, coupled with the challenge of dropping out of school. So, what is the status of women? President Yoweri Museveni says all these challenges can be addressed if we ensure economic empowerment at the household level, where a man and woman are doing well financially. So we'll be looking at that issue deeply. We also have the spotlight on the Ugandan Parliament over the use of public resources, where Parliament has remained in the spotlight following that online parliamentary exhibition campaign, which exposed what is perceived to be abuse of public resources. The documents thrown in the public space show that a lot of money is being spent through allowances by the Speaker's office, but also MPs. The same campaign has also exposed what many are calling an act of immorality on the part of the former leader of opposition, Mathias Mpuuga. This after documents showed that he had been allocated 500 million shillings as a service award. At the time, he had only spent less than a year in office. Now, the National Executive Committee of his party, National Unity Platform, has written to him and told him to show cause why he should not be recalled from the position of Parliamentary Commissioner, where he's serving currently. We have also heard from the Inspector General of Government, who says they are going to launch an investigation into this matter. And we also know the campaigners are actually saying that most of the information that they are using has been derived from the Auditor General's report, which has allegedly described the handling of funds in Parliament as irregular. The panel. The Honorable Dr. Mike Sebalu, team leader at the Africa Integration Agenda. He recently served as the District Governor, Rotary District, 9213. He represented Uganda at the East African Legislative Assembly. But even before that, he was a member of Parliament representing Busiro East. Good evening, Honorable, and thank you very much for joining us on Spectrum Extra.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kenneth, for giving us an opportunity to celebrate the Women's Day this way. And you couldn't have done it better by balancing gender on the panel. Two gentlemen, and I want to say two fine gentlemen with the two distinguished ladies. So it is the best way of celebrating.
You know, you're praising yourself as a fine gentleman. I hope they don't say that you are rewarding yourself.
If you have any reason to doubt, please put it on the table.
You are rewarding yourself. Well, the other fine gentleman, by description given to us by Honorable Mike Sebalu, is Mr. Nicholas Opiyo, team leader at Chapter Four Uganda. He's a human rights lawyer, pundit on governance and human rights matters. Good evening, Mr. Opiyo, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Kenneth, for having us. And a very happy International Women's Day to all the women of this country and beyond. I think that we should celebrate women every day, but I think we must remind those who are not on this day that women are an integral part of our community, and any measure that excludes them from our community, just denies a huge percentage of our population from taking part in the active life of our country.
And you're very right. Our population now, 51.2% women.
I think that's an estimate.
An estimate.
When we last did the census.
Should be much more.
Yeah.
Should be much more. All right.
What will come out of the census?
All right. Our third
But
panelist.
if I may seek your indulgence also, I think this week marks the end of an era, the second era. The IGP retired from office, Kotho Chola. Interestingly, Kotho Chola and I entered the role of advocate on the same day. He was much older though, but he was a CD director at the time, and his term has ended. So we just wanted also just to wish him well.
Well, our third panelist, Ms. Perry Aritua, Executive Director at Women Democracy Network Chapter, that's the Ugandan chapter. She's also a lawyer and pundit on governance and human rights matters. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Kenneth, and good evening, viewers, listeners, my fellow panelists, and happy Women's Day to all my peers and all the women out there.
Well, Dr. Mike Sebalu told you today that we have a balance, and in some circles they actually call it parity. And in studio, Ms. Charity Ahimbisibwe, Executive Director, Election Laws Institute-Uganda Chapter, veteran election observer, veteran journalist. I must say, once a journalist, always a journalist. Thank you very much for making time to be with us here after some good time.
Thank you very much, Kenneth. Very happy to be back in studio. Indeed, I have been away for quite some time, but happy that I am here finally. Happy Women's Day to every woman out there, the ones that have managed to keep the voices going. Job well done. The ones that have kept your voice silent, please get up, speak up, because when you speak, you open space for other women. And happy to see Nick after 20 years.
20 years?
Yes, it's almost 20 years. I'm so happy.
To be precise, it's 3.5 years.
And so happy. It's been very long. It's really looking like 20 years. And so happy to see the Honorable Mike Sebalu, and of course to reconnect with you, Kenneth. I am very excited to be here today.
Well, it's always a pleasure to have you.
Some of us are celebrating this year, hanging out with executive ladies. They all go by executive.
Yes, and leadership.
All right. And I'll start with you, Honorable Mike Sebalu. This discussion we're having today of commemorating Women's Day goes into the big picture of women emancipation, getting women to the level where men have been for quite some time. And when you talk about women's emancipation, you look at so many things. Equality generally, in terms of what you already have as a man and wishing the woman to get where you are. But today, the theme seems to be rotating more on the issue of economic empowerment. But let me begin by getting your views. How you perceive women emancipation in Uganda, and what this commemoration of International Women's Day means to you as a man, but also a husband.
Yeah, first of all, as a man, I want to appreciate the fact that humanity is made up of both gender, and that should be reflected in all aspects of life. And as the husband, definitely the obligations on either party, but more importantly, opportunities that get availed along the way. So when we talk about the subject matter of emancipation, I look at it from the point of diversity, equity, and inclusion, where we appreciate the diversity, gender diversity within our populace, where we need to look at issues of equity in terms of opening up opportunities and availability of openings for both gender and inclusion, ensuring that whatever we do reflects. We want our country to be reflected as a mirror, whereby every aspect of our community, of our society, they see their image there. So when it comes to governance, when it comes to leadership, we really want to see women having their images properly projected within their numbers. Because hitherto we had a few peripheral women actors, and yet when you look at the population ratio, the women are much more than the men in this country, and as of necessity, ignoring the biggest part of your population and excluding it from fair and equitable participation in governance and public affairs, then that is the wrong way of doing it, because then you are creating a skewed kind of society. So the whole idea of being fair and creating equity and opening up opportunities is something that we need to celebrate. But there are also other considerations when such space is created and such space is made available. Then it should be filled both in terms of quantity and quality. And I want to say that we are not short of women with the quantity and the quality that can do that. So we need also to evaluate the performance of the women in the space so created, with the opportunities so given, and appreciate how far we've been able to go. I have something that disturbs me a bit in terms of equity. You know, you get these women, honorable, you get these ladies, I think I better use that, sounds better, that are given opportunity. Like in politics, for instance, you find someone is enjoying the affirmative action in eternity. I'm getting a bit disturbed there. Are we empowering just a few, or should we do it in such a way that after a certain level of empowerment, then we should be able to let go and again reach out to others that may need that kind of support. You find someone is in a district for 30 years. Is that now equity anymore? Because equity should also be reflected among the women themselves. Inclusion should also be within the women themselves, so that you include more and more upcoming in terms of creating opportunities and accessing available opportunities. But largely we've done well. Where we still have to do better, I think we have the capacity and ability to do better. But I want to really congratulate the women for the role they've played. Likewise, I want to also condole and bring my condolences for the women that we've lost ever since we celebrated the last Women's Day up to today. You know, fine ladies like Cecilia Ogwal, fine ladies like Impanga, and so many others. There are even those who are not at the level of visibility in their spaces, but who are doing quite a lot in the space of enhancing the female gender. So we miss them. The best we can do is to pick up their values, what they stood for, and the best way of paying them homage and giving them lasting tribute and memory is by carrying forward those very positive attributes that they stood for, they so much cherished, and they promoted.
All right, let's hear from Ms. Perry Aritua. You are one of those women who are deep into the women movement, shaking things here and there. I normally follow you, and one of the things I see you doing is actually training women leaders at the grassroots, counselors in different parts of this country. I've seen the workshops that you hold, but I've also heard you speak out on this issue of leadership, this issue of economic empowerment, which is one of the things the women movement keeps on saying is among the unfinished business. Now, here we are, and we have an opportunity to reflect on the theme that rotates around this issue of economic empowerment. What's your take?
Thank you, Kenneth, and thank you for giving us this opportunity to discuss this important issue, because one of the events that happens on International Women's Day is really conversations like this. Now, when you look at Uganda, we have a largely young population with about, there was a report by UNDP, I think 2020, they said 74% of Uganda's population is actually below 30 years. And if women are the majority, that means even in terms of population, the younger generation has more girls. So as we have this conversation on economic empowerment for women, it's important to also underscore the fact that about 40% of businesses in this country are actually owned by women. And this is still according to a UNDP report 2019-2020. And the same report says that 49% of Ugandan women have access to some form of financial service in comparison to 57% men. So women still have less access to financial services, and part of this is because for banks you require collateral. Now, when we look at land, about, I think the NDP2 then stated that about 31% of women own registered land. Now, if a bank is asking for collateral, and in most cases that is land, then this statistic would actually be true, because more men would then have access to especially loans in banks, because more of them own land, which they can give us collateral. Now, if you have a young population like Uganda, within that 31%, you will find that very few would be under 30, would be 30-year-olds and below. Because the majority of this population is young. Now, what does that mean? That we need to continuously think about new ways in which young people can access the economy, can earn from the economy. One of the things that I also see when we do work in the field is the limited access to technology. And we know that when you have access to the internet, there are opportunities on the internet in terms of jobs, in terms of information to grow your business, you know, the different services that can be accessed through really the digitization. Now, when you have a young population, a number of females not having access to technology, then you're practically kicking them out of the economy. Now, it's also true that women's economic empowerment is key for women's empowerment. And we'll look at different situations. For instance, when it comes to accessing even just health services, you need money. Now, if you are unhealthy and you don't have a source of income and you don't have anyone to give you that money, you will die. That's the reality. When it comes to even decision-making, especially our political decision-making, I've seen women not even being able to afford nomination fees at both council level and also parliament. So that tells you that having economic empowerment also creates other social and political empowerment for women. Now, we also know that there have been a number of programs that government of Uganda has put in place, PDM, WEP. What I always find disturbing is lack of in-depth assessment of how much these programs have transformed the lives of women. And I think that's important, because if you want to know whether lives are being transformed, you need to be able to evaluate. For instance, after you finish WEP, what has changed? Where are the gaps? Which kind of women are accessing these services? Because when we have had conversations on some of these programs, you'll find there's a lot of corruption. So even women who genuinely would have, accessed that money and grown their businesses, some of them have not been able to access this money.
There's a new project that is going to be implemented by government, $40 million. Which
is the GROW project.
$217 million.
By the World Bank.
By the World Bank.
Yes.
And that seems to be the main focus now, whereby they are going to be giving loans to women who are in business. You actually said 40%. And the interest rate has been capped below 10%.
Yeah, that would be good, and that's why I'm saying it's important to have transparency.
But then you raise the issues of corruption.
Yes.
How do we deal with it? Does that mean that most women who are supposed to actually benefit are left out?
Now, that's why I'm saying we need an in-depth assessment of these different programs, who actually benefits, because the little studies that have been done shows that there's also corruption within who benefits. So you find, for instance, when it comes to WEP, you'll go to the rural parts of this country, and women who are genuinely running businesses, who would actually have a big implication for other women, do not access these funds. While you'll find people who are either connected to the politics, access this money, misuse this money.
Or even men.
I'll come to that. Misuse this money, and they get away with it because of whom they are connected to. The other thing is you need to deal with social norms. Now, that's the issue of, who has control. You can access this money, but if the man still thinks that he has control over you and everything that you earn and own, then you have a problem. And that's why at times you find even it becomes difficult for government to recover money. Because you reach home, as soon as you enter the household, that money is taken away from you because you don't have bargaining power. And that's why you cannot do these programs in isolation. You need to deal with the social norms. And norms are things which people practice for long, and at times they think it's the right thing to do. Where they say you're property because we paid dowry. Now, those kind of beliefs affect government's programming, and that's why you cannot do these programs like GROW without dealing with those other factors that may make it difficult for you to gain the benefits. And that's why, for me, my question would be, if you're establishing a program like GROW, what is the role of the other actors who are very relevant in terms of addressing these social norms? The cultural leaders, the women's rights organizations who work in these communities, the religious leaders. You need to be able to deal with attitudes and beliefs. Otherwise, you'll give the money and you will not gain the benefits. Now, the other thing that I would also like to say in terms of women's economic empowerment is that when women are empowered, it's not only them who benefit. We have seen this, that you'll find there will be expenditure on families. There will be expenditure in the community because, they buy most of the household things. Then they'll also pay government taxes. So government gains because the more women who are working, the more taxes government collects. So that's why for me it's a win-win that for any government, you must focus on both genders, the men and the women. But the biggest population in this country is women. And young women. And I think that's why having a conversation on young women as we have these discussions is very important. Because there's a report by USAID which showed that many of them are actually interested in agriculture. People have this thing that young people are not interested in culture. It's not true. What they're looking for is, 1, land. 2, what are the inputs for if they are to get involved? Value addition, training, mentoring, being exposed. So if we don't have that conversation, and we're saying 74% of our population is under 30, we will not be getting the results that we want to achieve.
Right, Spectrum Extra on Radio 1 FM 90. Dear listener, be part of this show by sharing your views with us. Use our WhatsApp line, which is 0703-090-090. We're going for a break now. When we return, we'll hear the views of Mr. Nicholas Opiyo and Miss Charity Ahimbisibwe as we continue reflecting on the commemoration of the International Women's Day, which is under the theme Accelerating Gender Equality Through Women Economic Empowerment. Stay tuned. Radio 1 FM 90. Spectrum Extra continues after this break.
Spectrum Extra, Fridays 7 to 9 p.m. on Radio 1 FM 90.
Thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum Extra live on Radio 1 FM 90. You can imagine the deep discussion that actually continued in our studio. We were actually reflecting on whether wealth can create a semblance of peace in a homestead, in line with a statement which was made by President Yoweri Museveni earlier today when he said that when a man and a woman are all rich and the family is well financially, the likelihood of having violence in that setup is actually
reduced,
minimized. Yeah. Is that true, Perry?
Yes, it is true.
Why is it true?
Because when you don't have money, then you are conflicting on basic necessities. There's no school fees, you're going to quarrel. There's no food, you're going to quarrel. But there are also people who just are badly brought up. Bad attitude, that even when you have resources, they are just violent, and that's where those ones need help, because money is just one of the aspects, but it's not everything. I think for me, a lot of it is how you communicate, how you partner, and that's why this whole conversation on gender is about partnership, that we fly together you know. So there are many other things that add value. But poverty is also a cause of GBV.
There are some people who actually say when women become wealthy, they start flying first class and leave
that is
in
not
the economy class.
That is a general...
If you know what I mean.
Yes, that's a general statement, but it's not true. Yeah,
well,
it's not true.
Let's bring in the final
patriarchal stereotype.
I do share an experience of that.
Let's bring in the final gentleman, Mr. Nicholas Opiyo. During the break, you actually shared something which was very interesting, which tried to indicate that wealth in a home may necessarily not be a center of peace. Some people can actually use it as a weapon.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've done several cases where people who have means don't have peaceful relationships simply because of cultural differences. I think that, and this is just anecdotal, it's not scientific, many women, largely from Western Uganda, are supposed to be seen but not heard and live in extreme violence. I've done several cases. The Katanga case is just one such case, that wealth doesn't necessarily mean...
What do you mean they are not supposed to be seen?
You must look beautiful, you must dress well.
Oh, you must be seen.
But never really have voice.
Okay.
Never really have voice. And they'll pour you with all the resources they have, the money, the vehicles, whatever it is you need, a home. But you're just a subject of a man. And so wealth may not be necessarily a measure of how... It certainly can mitigate conflict, but definitely doesn't really mean that it will ensure peace in a home. People quarrel for different reasons. And the reverse is true, that sometimes when...
Even the majority of the divorce cases,
yes,
you find that they are very closely associated to...
With the resources.
Yeah.
Carry on, Mr. Nicholas Opiyo.
And so, but the point that I wanted to make was that women's emancipation or women's empowerment is not a technical issue. And many times when you hear people speak about it, they have a project, they have a new law, but really this is a deeply political and cultural issue. Unless you have an atmosphere in which we appreciate the values of women, all these projects you are doing in yoga, the minister has listed about 10 projects, it's all meaningless because it ends up not solving the problem. And that's the question that Madam Perry asked. Why don't we assess the impact of these projects? Because these impacts don't add up. And precisely because we are treating women's emancipation as a technical issue. We are treating women's emancipation really as a token issue.
As a favor.
It's a token, a political token, without necessarily... That is why you have an explosion of institutional frameworks and normative frameworks that purport to address the emancipation of women. You know, we have beautiful laws, we have institutions, but those institutions really have not translated into a significant change in the lives of ordinary women. I'm talking about the vast majority of rural ordinary women. And we have got to ask ourselves, you know, these normative frameworks and these institutional frameworks, why haven't they solved the problem? Because there's no political will and commitment to address the question of women. Look at our investments in health. The people who die giving life are women. 1 in every 6 women is losing life giving birth. We committed to making a certain percentage of our budget invested in addressing this issue. But those commitments remain in paper because there is no political will to make sure that women are empowered. This tokenism, this lip service we give women, we've got to examine it. Take, for instance, I actually think that we could make more output investing in economic empowerment programs for women than electing a woman MP. The cost, the unit cost of a woman MP does not translate into the expected output to benefit more women. Okay? In any event, it only entrenches what I think is tokenism. Okay? And I think that we've got to examine whether these approaches are approaches that make sense. The second thing really is this, and you've got to go and read a book, a 2014 book, to understand the point that I'm belaboring to make in my very poor English. a book by a gentleman called William Easterly. The book is called The Tyranny of Experts, Economists, Dictators, and the Forgotten Right of the Poor. It is a revealing book that tears down what we see as colonial, post-colonial, and new colonial systems of development that have left the poor, if not poorer. It introduces a term called authoritarian development, where development is dictated for you from Western capitals. And so we must have a new paradigm shift to addressing women's empowerment. And I think this token program that the ministers laid out really don't address the problem. In my view, I think we must begin to invest in rural women, okay? Giving them equal access to opportunities, whether it is access to financial, credit facilities, the same way men have access to the means of production.
Parish development model.
That is the same as a yoga, same as all the other names.
Women entrepreneurship program.
Well, you can list them. That's what the ministers listed. That's what the ministers listed.
Grow project.
I mean, she's so eager to list that if you saw the list, she repeats another one twice. Those programs do not help. If it helped, Northern Uganda would be the richest part of this country. Luero Triangle would be the richest part of this country. These are political projects to win election, to siphon funds. Meaningful access to resources means that you have to have rural women access resources, not at 10% rates, because countries that develop don't lend at 10% rates. It's 2% is even very high.
2%
is even high in many economies, because you want to because there's something called the velocity of money. The faster money moves, the more it makes itself. So if you have a 10% interest rate on loans, you're not helping these people who are trying to borrow. What you're actually doing is making the financial institutions even richer. Okay? And so we've got to go back and begin to look at even interest-free loans that help people to multiply money, to increase the velocity of money. It means that you must have access at very low minimal rates to encourage production, to encourage the deployment of money, to make more money. And women can do this better than men in so many ways. The second thing you must do, I think, is access to skills training beyond. Our education system is broken. We've got to begin to teach people skills on how to employ themselves, deploy themselves in a way that is productive. If you read the universities alone and come to the marketplace, you're going to be a laborer. You're going to be, So we've got to go back to skills training.
Look at point number 5 on the minister's statement. The presidential initiative project on skilling
when you hear presidential talk, just know it's a waste of time.
75,000 girls have been trained since its inception in 2017 under State House.
Well, I have a different view. I don't think that's a very efficient way to do this kind of things. If you're talking about skills training is not a 2 months training. It's a process of training that begins to train a person very early. It's continuous, it's integrated, it's long term. Because the skills, I met 2 Ugandans in San Diego who had fled there for various reasons. One was a plumber here, and he had a plumbing company, but he couldn't do plumbing in in San Diego because the skills they need there, the tools, he doesn't even know them. So skilling is not a 2 weeks course at some workshop. It's a continuous process of development, and
it has levels.
Yes, levels.
All right. Very quickly, thank you very much for your views there.
Let's begin. It's not an event where you then gather people in Kololo, you drum, you sing, you ask a man to turn again. That's politicking.
All right.
Can I say something
very quickly before we bring in Charity?
And that's why one of the questions I keep asking when we go back to the field is, these women actually still prefer to borrow from their own circles because their interest rates are lower. Somehow they trust their own processes. So when you even introduce these new, they are looking at it like this. We can't trust this, So I think
Bank
what you're saying
is a colonial and pluralistic project intended to make money for the World Bank.
All right, let's bring in Charity. Charity, your views on a commemoration of International Women's Day, but we are looking at the status of women in Uganda, the issues that remain unresolved.
I like the issues that remain unresolved, and I'll be addressing my mind to them. But I've just reflected a bit on what Nick concluded with. The World Bank projects are a tool of the oppressor. They're a tool of neo-colonialists. I mean, the colonialists to oppress us. So don't read us your World Bank projects.
Well, remember, Uganda is a board member of the World Bank.
It is a big...
Uganda is not a board member of
it
the
is
World Bank.
a tool.
It's no longer.
And Kenneth, don't lie to the public. So, the unfinished business.
Hey.
The theme, the one that you're running away with, is count her in. But I like the African Union theme. The African Union theme says invest in a woman, accelerate growth. Now, it leaves the investment open, saying, therefore, you can invest time in this woman, you can invest knowledge in this woman, you can, and I'm going to give you practical examples of people who have invested knowledge. I have a professor friend at Makerere University, I'll not mention his name. When he met his wife, she had 1 degree. He took her to do a master's in South Africa. That time she had produced 1 boy. He took over and looked after the boy until she was back from South Africa. 2 years she did in South Africa. Then he sent her back for a PhD. That time they had 2 boys. He took over and looked after the 2 boys. She was in South Africa for 4 years. She kept going. When she got to the research level, she came back here. He supported her on the research journey. And when she was done with her doctorate, he found her a job here in Uganda. Very good job, outstanding. The home is stable, very stable.
So it appears.
Oh, no, not so it appears. It is stable.
What do you imagine?
The home is stable. Nobody is threatening neither the man nor the woman. So when it comes to investing, and the Honorable Mike Sebalu, can you rise to the occasion of investing in a woman? Okay, that is what I'm trying to say. So. And you know, opinions vary, but at least what we have seen is that the home is stable. And I'm giving an example. They could change, factors change from home to home. The challenges that we are seeing are the following. And Kenneth, you list them very well, that the woman is the face of poverty. You know, President Museveni has ever gone to Kamuli, and he went to Mayuge, and he found women with their breasts popping out of gomeses. And he looked at them and said, really, is this what you would amount to? Is it true you people are this poor? He was shocked. But you know why?
That was sometime last year?
No, it's now been about 4 or 5 years when he was... the one of last year was the road, which had been repaired, and he couldn't understand how that road had been run down when he was heading to Jinja with his wife. So the woman remains the face of poverty. That is unfinished business. 2, violence. Violence is unfinished business. 3, so you have listed your projects, but I'm coming for them. I'm asking the question. If it is so true that 76% of women are involved in agriculture, but you're raising statistics here of 68% of households, the presidential initiative has been able to support families up to a tune of 68%. Why are we seeing the faces of poverty of women across this country? Because these are facts, that we have 76% of our women in agriculture, 50% of them in active workforce. So if these are the statistics and we're seeing women, what do we want? What do we want? We want an increase in investment in a woman to be able to have financial freedom. Okay? The other issue that you highlight here is the health-related challenges. And it is true. Education coupled with health-related challenges is a big issue. I suppose that if we had an educated population of women, what would happen is primary health care in the home would all be handled by the woman. So the woman would know why you need boiled drinking water, you need a clean compound, you need a good household, you need a clean house, you need good beddings to sleep on, you must have personal hygiene where you need to brush. they would teach those things. And they did that in the past. But what is happening now is that less and less of them stay in school. Why? Early marriages. Why? Teenage pregnancy. And even after they've given birth, they're not being pulled to go back to school. Why? Because... And look at the statistics, Kenneth. Yes. Go ask.
Well, you raised those issues, but one would say some of these issues can be learnt from home. You don't have to pick them from schools.
Like what?
Like working around your compound, making your bed, etc.
Kenneth,
you don't have to go
I have lived in communities with people drinking unboiled water. In Busoga, in Kanungu, and I have asked the question, why do you take that water from a puddle where cows are drinking water from? They're picking water there. And they said, but we've always taken water from here and nothing has happened. Why haven't they learnt it from their home?
Probably before you left Kanungu to come to Kampala.
Why haven't they learnt it?
You took that water.
And I'm saying, why haven't they learnt it from their home? So exposure does change your mindset. Knowledge, information changes how you think. And it gives you a way in which you interact with different facets of life. And therefore, I still insist that women, if we are going to transform society, because we said accelerate growth, if you want to see that growth change, you must educate them. You must get those girls that are dropping out of school back into school. And when you get them back into school, spend time on them, invest, do what Nick is saying here, skill them continually, so that they know how to deal with the world as they deal with it. The other unfinished business. You talked about the issue of, that one we have handled, economic empowerment, low economic empowerment. And low economic empowerment is the same thing with poverty. Okay? It's the same thing with poverty. The difference is, if a woman goes into farming, she is thinking about, how do I grow food for my home? I want to show you the issue that is happening in Kabale right now. That when a woman inherits land, she's denied a chance to own that land. Her brothers take the land from her. The RDC's office is swarmed with cases of how women are complaining how their fathers gave them land, but they're being denied the land by brothers, by relatives. And they say you cannot own that land. But if she has that land and can grow food for the household and can grow food to sell, then her economic power goes up. Then we also have the question of land cases. Land cases, apart from the inherited land, the woman buying her land and then the man owns it.
You have to register it in the name of the man.
Yeah. It is an issue that is there in Kabale. Now, land is a resource. It is a resource for production. And I'm talking about Kabale because this is where I have statistics for. This is what I see happening in Kabale, but I'm sure it replicates itself across the country. That women find themselves in a problem of lack of failing to inherit, and that is also coming from a question of stereotypes, patriarchal society, perpetuated positions, failure to understand that you must invest in a woman. Part of the investment in this woman is to understand that if you give her this land and she's going to do that for model farming of President Museveni, there is a figure here. He keeps showing us this for model. And if you've empowered a woman to do this for model, you're going to change your country. You're going to change your society. It is possible. But because we're having less and less women in this facet owning land, they're the ones who are crying. When they have land today, tomorrow the men have taken it. They can't inherit the land. When they grow their food, the man will go and sell that food, and then she has nothing. I met a woman today who told me for her she opened a shop, put in her husband, and the husband kept selling things until the shop collapsed comfortably. So you see, the question of economic power.
I have a case which is very interesting. I have a farm somewhere. Then the woman is rearing pigs. But it is rumored that the husband comes and steals them.
These days we have seen stories in the media where women went to work in the Arab world, sent back money home, and In some cases, the men actually built houses and married other women. So by the time they came back, there was a house and a bride in that particular house.
So you see, the danger of failing to invest in a woman and looking at the question of economic emancipation. When we look at issues of investment, it is broader than just the word. You can invest knowledge, you can invest money, you can invest education, you can invest land, you can invest material, whatever it is. You can even invest support mechanism. That if this woman has to be on a radio station like now, you support. Do other things that she would ordinarily have done in her home. So there must be a support mechanism. We just have a research from UMWA which shows that 80% of the voices in media are men. Where are the women? They are home. And the journalists who spoke to us said, when we call these women, they tell us, I'm going to pick my children, I'm going to cook, I have to look after my household, I can't attend. These were male journalists, and the female journalists, even Mildred Tuhaise, said, this is a true characteristic of women panelists. She will come today, and she will return after 10 months. But when that voice is not there, what does it do? It means that we have less and less of the women views.
All right. Perry, you wanted to jump in, then we'll bring in Honorable Mike Sebalu.
You know, in summary, we must deal with the social norms and discriminatory practices. Because you can have all these things, but if people's attitudes, beliefs, which are shaped by cultural practices, our socialization, if you don't deal with that, it will continue to be a drop in the ocean.
Honorable Mike Sebalu.
Yeah, I'm riding it on that, mindset, attitude, and worldview. If you're talking about transformation, there's no way you can transform without the majority. There's simply no way. You have to reach out to the majority, work on them in all ways, the kind of investment she's been talking about. And when we talk about strategic investment, for me that is more strategic. Because once you deal with it at that basic level, then you can build up, and the secondary level of investment becomes much easier to manage.
All right.
And the results are much more predictable.
All right, Spectrum Extra on Radio 1 FM 90. We're going to go for a break. When we return, we'll look at some of the comments that have come in from the listeners. But there's one other critical issue, an enabler that Honorable Mike Sebalu talked about. Women in governance spaces. What are they doing there? Are they helping the other women? There's been a discussion about reducing the size of parliament, and people have been talking about how we can actually reduce the number of women who are in parliament. President Yoweri Museveni spoke about this issue today and said if they had not created more spaces for women, probably only 17 women will be in the Ugandan parliament, because they are the only ones that were able to compete and win a seat that is directly competed for. Stay tuned, Radio 1 FM 90. Spectrum Extra continues after this break.
Spectrum Extra, Fridays 7 to 9 p.m. on Radio 1 FM 90.
Thank you so much for staying with us. This is Spectrum Extra on Radio 1 FM 90. My name is Kenneth Lukwagandason, your host. My panel today, Dr. Honorable Mike Sebalu, Team Leader at the Africa Integration Agenda, Ms. Charity Ahimbisibwe, Executive Director, Election Laws Institute-Uganda Chapter, Ms. Perry Aritua, Executive Director at Women Democracy Network-Uganda Chapter, and Mr. Nicholas Opiyo, Team Leader at Chapter Four Uganda, Human Rights Lawyer, and a pundit on governance and human rights issues. Our first segment, we've been reflecting on commemoration of Women's Day, the status of women in Uganda, and it seems we are all looking at a situation where women are not being given that opportunity to actually get where they're supposed to be, especially on the economic front. 40% of businesses in Uganda are owned by women, but you look at statistics, most of them do not make the first year anniversary. They collapse because one of the things they are facing is the lack of cheap credit. But the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development says there are a number of initiatives that have been put in place by the government to actually help women sustain their businesses. So let's reflect on some of the comments that are already coming in from the WhatsApp line 0703-090-090. Dembe Dumba writes in and said, we should start funding gender-based companies where a man holds 50% shares and a woman holds 50% shares, so as to balance the equation. So as to balance the equation, top of spreading the risk. However, women who have more than men want to prove it publicly. That's a comment from Dumba there. Another comment from Mawa Amazo, who is listening in from Moyo District in the West Nile region. Thank you very much for tuning in. Giving citizens money is creating more problems for the country. You can't give a hungry person food to keep for another person. NRM is expired. Expecting something good from them is like waiting for my 94 years old mother to conceive. That's a comment there from Moyo Amaza, who is listening. Amaza, I must tell you that these days technology can make things happen. So,
your mother like that.
Well, he actually says the mother has gone beyond the age of actually conceiving.
Some of these
Which could be a fact, Honorable Mike Sebalu.
Not all facts are appropriate.
All right, we have a comment coming in from Stan. Stan says, thanks for the show. Happy Women's Day, panelists. The question of inclusion and empowerment for women is very critical to achieving the 2040 agenda. However, as Perry stated, the aspect of violence, more so sexual violence perpetuated by social norms and cultural beliefs that have normalized defilement, has contributed to the escalating teenage pregnancy that where limited efforts of the government, where we're also seeing limited efforts by the government as far as financial inclusion is concerned, because men have since left their roles and the burden to the women. This waters down the efforts of the government to address financial inclusion, for instance, through PDM. Spectrum Extra, little has been done on bailing women out of sexual harassment in jobs. Let those ladies in studio help us, the ladies. And government has done little on maternal mortality rate. Well, those are some of the comments are coming in very quickly. If you want to comment on any, or Honorable Mike Sebalu, let me begin with you.
Yeah, thank you very much. The issue of maternal and child mortality is very important. That is an area we do take seriously in Rotary, and we've invested heavily in that space. I think it is an area that needs to be given priority, even at the planning stages of government, because once you handle it well, then there's a lot that you avoid. You know, keeping girls in school for long has so many advantages, as already ably given. Then it also brings the literacy levels up. You know, when you have a literate population, you know, even as basics as getting, you know, your medicine, you get a doctor prescribing. Even knowing that I need to do this in the evening, in the morning, going to pick medicine, they appear basic, but that is the basis of transformation.
All right.
Because you deal with the mothers, you deal with the children at formative stage. That also goes to basic education and literacy. That is how you prepare a population that can be responsive in terms of going forward.
Perry, very quickly.
Yeah, on the issue of sexual harassment, as I said, we need to deal with the issue of social norms. You know, when you perceive someone as an object, even when there are good laws and policies, you may just think these are jokes. So, and to make people who perpetrate these crimes not to see this as a joke, we need to deal with enforcement. So one, work on the mindsets, and this begins from our homes. You know that you must respect each other. There are boundaries. People must know that there are boundaries on how you deal with people in terms of, you know, their bodies, the things that you say. Then secondly, companies, organizations must have policies which they enforce, because it's one thing to have a policy against sexual harassment and to have it there on the shelf unenforced. Because when people see something is enforced, it deters others. But if it's not enforced, then those who had that mindset will say, okay, look, so-and-so did it and got away with it. So the issue of having the policy, enforcing it so that it acts as a deterrent for those who would have wanted to perpetrate some of those crimes is very, very important. In my other life, I have done work with political parties in terms of policies against sexual harassment. And I have seen that when the leadership is committed to this policy, and when they are very, very firm in terms of how they communicate to their members and their fellow leaders, you see there's some hesitation. from even those who have been perpetrators. But if people just think, this is a norm, this is how we have always behaved, nothing has happened, it will continue. So for me, those would be my 3 recommendations. Policy, enforcement, leaders showing that this is a no-go area.
Mr. Nicholas
And
Opiyo.
on top of that, awareness creation. We really need to invest in that space.
Mr. Nicholas Opiyo.
Continuous.
I mean, I agree with the points raised by my colleagues, but just for purposes of introspection, the women movement must reflect very deeply on whether the majority is behaving with a minority mindset. Really, you have the numbers. What is the problem? I think it's a mindset as well. If they all came together and have a women's agenda, the politicians would listen. They have the numbers. So maybe just purpose of introspection, the women's movement could think about how they can use their numbers to good effect in politics. They cannot participate in their own subjugation. Some of the things they do is self-defeating. Right? And if they got organized, perhaps... and I think that they don't have to get locked up in what is called the Stockholm Syndrome, believing that your captors have your best interests. I'm going to be your saviors. The women of this country will only be saved if they are united together and have a front that thinks about women in a deliberate, consistent manner.
Focused.
Yeah. Not these scattered things. But also, when you send us women leaders, send us your very best. Really, to be honest, send us your very best. Some leaders really make it difficult for these points to sit.
The way you're saying, send us your very best. All the Ugandans elect the woman MP.
I'm talking about all of us.
I'm so happy with what Nicholas is saying here, unfortunately.
We have an agenda, but what I must add is that you're also dealing with structural factors that at times make it difficult for you to espouse that agenda. Because you talk of the MPs, at times they are so controlled by their parties, they are so controlled by the tokenism that even when they see that health is a big issue, they are thinking, what will happen to my next election?
The gender issues are bipartisan.
That's how it should be.
Beyond the partisan
That's how it should be.
So that's why the ladies, the women should be intentional, purposeful, and deliberate. When it comes to the issues.
Good you said that. And he's saying, send the ideal woman.
The ideal woman MP is my question. You're dealing with a society where money comes first, where violence and
the
just
best dancer is elected.
But okay, some of the ideal women are selected by the president.
All right, we still have comments actually coming in. Why can't we think of differently taxing women less compared to men when it comes to income tax as part of relieving them of the burdens? Give tax holidays to women-led companies or companies that employ more women and subsidize the cost of getting trading license for women and market dues for those in the market. Merely political representation of women in parliament, district and sub-county council do not help our mothers. Those ones work for their families. If I were the president, any woman who earns less than 500,000 will only pay local service tax, not payee. That is George Anyua, who is listening in from Iganga. Somebody else says, I invested in my wife and now she is sleeping around with men above our age. That is a comment from Emmanuel. Then we have another.
He has shared.
Oh my God!
Then we have another one. Good evening, Kenneth and panelists in studio. My name is Wilson Bikakanga Mienga. I agree with Charity on the stuff.
Who are educated.
I agree.
They educate their girlfriends or whatever. After graduation,
they go somewhere. I agree with Charity.
Those cases are quite.
I agree with Charity on the statistics of women in business, but you cannot finance women enterprises when stealing money in Uganda has reached deplorable heights as it is today. The example is what is being stolen in Parliament under the watch of the only people mandated to oversee government performance. We will be getting to that topic next. Good evening, Kenneth and the journalists in studio. This sympathy narrative on land ownership for women to access financial services is old card. That must stop being preached immediately. I'm a banker. The bank I work for, I won't mention the name because you will sue me you will issue me an invoice. But if you don't mind, in good spirit of uplifting women, on this special day, the bank is BRAC, Uganda Limited. BRAC empowers women at the bottom of the pyramid without asking for collateral. This is for adolescent child and established women in business. It's high time that leaders and influencers put a command in the market and provide guidance for communities where to find friendly service and to create linkages. We welcome all pro-women NGOs to partner with us in deepening financial inclusion across the society. Whining on radio without factual content on market trends that can help women is deceptive. Richard, you use a strong language there when you say my panelists are whining. I do not understand you at all. But we take your comment in good faith. Then we have another comment from Okuni John, who actually writes and says, thanks for the program. I have loved the discussion. Talking about women, call for a parents' meeting in a school. The only people you see in attendance in big numbers are women. Where are the men? Women deserve more support. We have another comment coming in from Albert Wandera. Happy Women's Day. My advice goes to men as we celebrate this day. Please do not and never invest in a woman unless she's your daughter, mother, or sister. Married women are like bees. They follow nectars. Once the flower is out of the nectars, they will flee. That's a comment from Wandera.
These are victims.
Nicholas, please, get those on the mic.
You know, sometimes you've got to take a social interpretation of some of those statements. And you begin to see what is wrong with our society.
And you've seen the trend.
Yeah. Sociologists will tell you, those guys need help. These guys need help. They've had bad experiences. But I also think that we have to be cognizant of the fact that many people, of course, have their own views, but many of these views are really views that are shaped and formed by this patriarchal structure in which they have grown up in. And you know, somebody referring to his mother in the time that he did, in my community would be abhorrent. You can't do that. And so you've got to recognize your privilege before you talk about the plight of other people. I think if you don't recognize your place in society and the privilege you enjoy as a man, or indeed even as a woman, you may misinterpret a lot of things in life.
All right. Well, gentlemen and ladies, let's actually now move on to our next topic.
But Ken, I thought I should make only two comments.
Very quickly.
One of the comments is deepening financial inclusion for women, which is raised by BRAC. One of the things I need to put out there is that information is not readily available to all women, especially in the rural areas. While we have women in Kampala, maybe on WhatsApp and on phones, and they will hear radio somewhere, they will hear, they watch TV programs, the statistics show that upcountry it is very difficult. So how much information are we pushing out to the 76% that I talked about that are in this bracket? And the question for him to say, let's not play the land issue. I dare you to come and look at the statistics from the NGO perspective. Data, numbers don't lie. Come and see the data, come and see the baseline, and be shocked to intervene to handle the numbers. Emmanuel and Wandera, sorry about your experience, but I honestly think that if a woman has been spent time on intentionally, it is hardly possible that a woman who has seen a man struggle to make her will just walk away. We have a case of one from LDC who the man said, I paid money for, and when she came here, she said, now for you, a farmer in the village, me, I am a lawyer, how am I going to connect with you? And she moved on. There are those...
The Supreme Court judge
yes,
who became a Supreme Court judge and then took her husband to their family and said, have your son.
So there are those cases, and they do exist. We cannot say they do not exist. They exist. But that does not mean we should not invest in these women. Some success stories do exist. And if we choose that we want to accelerate growth, and we are saying that 53% of voters in Uganda are women, 51.3% of the old statistic are women, then investing in them will help us see a change in our society.
All right. We need now to shift our gears and go to the People's Representative House, that is Parliament, where we continue to receive reports about alleged financial mishandling. We all know what has been happening on social media, where we have seen things being highlighted there. Of course, Parliament has insisted that whatever funds they have been spending is within their budget, and as a self-accounting institution, self-budgeting and self-accounting institution, they have a right to spend the way they can, because most of the decisions they make are discussed in the Parliamentary Commission, and they are all done for the good of the people of Uganda, but also making sure their representatives actually do their work properly. I'll begin with you, Honorable Mike Sebalu. You have been in that house before. You've been there in that house before. What's your take? Why is everyone scared of commenting about these issues in Parliament?
In Parliament.
Take it by the bull, Honorable Mike Sebalu. Institutional memory.
Yes. Yeah, I think, one, we need to know the work of Parliament, the fundamentals of Parliament. One, you have the legislative role, making laws and guiding in that aspect. Two, representative, that is representing the views of the people. And three, you have the appropriation and also oversight. So in doing that work, Parliament is facilitated to do it. And one, we need to look at the size of the Parliament as is now. And there are questions which we should start asking. For purposes of representation, what is the scale of representation? Because I can represent a district, and if I'm supported and enabled, I can ably get information regarding the district and be able to put forward the needs and the demands of the district. So we need to look at what entails in representation in terms of scope, in terms of depth, and in terms of engagement. Then you have the legislative, and then you have the oversight. We've had parliaments before. They may not have spent the way maybe the spending is now. But are you going to say that they did less representation? Are you going to say they did less legislation? Are you going to say they did less oversight? I think these are questions now we start to ask. And you can also look at certain aspects now with the advent of technology. Because now you can actually use Zoom, you can use quite a number of capabilities technologically to do work which hitherto needed your physical presence, your physical appearance, and your physical engagement. So at the end of the day, I think we need to have leaders being accountable, and being accountable is giving value for money. Because people are going to ask, when you look at the money spent, what is the value vis-a-vis other parliaments elsewhere? Because we even have parliaments within our region. You have Tanzania, you have Rwanda, you have Kenya. If you look at the unit cost in terms of expenditure on an MP or a parliamentary leader, and the outcome, how do we then relate? And as a population, I think we need some of those comparative studies to be able to look at the level of spending vis-a-vis the outcome, the output, and the impact. Because at the end of the day, it is about impact. We are talking about women today, the issues that have been raised today. How do they inform the spending? Or how has the spending informed the process of enhancing the needs of the women? Have we been able to look at what is working and why it is working? Have we been able to look at what is not working and why it is not working? Have we been able to look at what we can do differently? So I think the idea of making Parliament independent and giving it self-accounting status is a good idea, but should not be overstretched, and at worst should not be abused, because the intentions were for purposes of allowing it to function efficiently and effectively. And with modern management, numbers are not synonymous with efficiency and effectiveness. there are many organizations now which are taking a model of a lean but efficient and effective, team and operational procedures to allow a bigger return on the investment. Because we need to look at the investment in Parliament. We've been talking about investing in women, but we also look at investing in the Parliament. What is the value proposition? What is the return on the investment? Because the return on investment in our case is service delivery. But when we hear about service delivery, a lot needs to be made good or even better. When you go to check out a few places, you find that it is not working well. So Parliament has a responsibility and an obligation to liberate its image. It is getting soiled. It is now in the media not for the good reasons. I think it can be there for better reasons and better results. But the budget, there are two things we need to look at in this debate. We need to look at the tax regime. People are choking with the tax. But people wouldn't mind if the tax they pay has a return and is impactful in terms of ameliorating their welfare. So when you are paying so much tax and you are seeing expenditure in the roof and the return on the investment is not forthcoming, then the population may really get a bit disturbed. And I think that is not the best way. So let's give value to the people through the responsibilities that we are given and taking our responsibilities very seriously.
All right, let's bring in Charity. Charity, your view on this debate that is going on now. We're hearing calls that there should be a probe into Parliament, and the IGG actually says they're going to undertake it. Do you think what we have seen so far necessitates an investigation at that level?
So we saw the genesis of the story was the exhibition, the Parliament exhibition. And from that Parliament exhibition, two things happened. Bobi Wine called a crisis meeting in Noop, and a discussion ensued, and they agreed on certain actions. He has been accused unfairly because he put out a statement where he said, from our meeting, our deliberations, I had my deputy presidents across the regions, before I say across, in Runyankodi. You understood, thank God. So all his deputy presidents, he called them, and he called other members. He called the Honorable Medad Segona and
respectable others. MPs. That he said MPs that are
to consult on the issue. So it's not like Bobi Wine just woke up and decided to write out of the blue and take a decision against the Honorable Mpoga without paying attention to what it would possibly cause for the political party. So then he went ahead to issue 10 reasons why it was not proper for the Honorable Mpoga to have attained this money. Now, from there, we also saw a letter coming in from Honorable Mpoga that told us a number of things. For him, he did not agree with the process, and he thought it was being unfair on him, and it was so hard on him. And so the public enters. And the public now plays politics, one group against the other, and eventually, there was the bigger question. Why are the other members who sat on this committee, the commission, why did they receive money, but they were not being asked how they received 400 million and other millions that were put across for them? And the bigger question, therefore, is we have a consolidated fund. Do we or don't we?
We do.
And we have an article in the Constitution, which is Article 153, that talks about the consolidated fund. Article 154 talks about how that consolidated fund will be managed and how money should be drawn from the consolidated fund. And the process of accountability is emphasized across by the Constitution. So somebody cannot say that because of Article 85 and 85A, Parliament therefore can do whatever they want as they give themselves emoluments and they give themselves service grants and service awards.
Well,
there is
we
a
know
structure.
Their emoluments.
They do, but there is a checks and balance. The 1995 Constitution entirely is a constitution that relies on checks and balances for the three arms of government, for the executive, for the judiciary, and parliament, the legislature. So at no one time can the executive just do everything they so wish they want to do. There is a check for them in the legislature, and there is a check for them in the judiciary.
That's what the Constitution is.
That is how the Constitution is constructed. Now, the way these people conducted themselves, it's as though we do not have laws. We don't have a standard. You can choose to do what you want to do and then come back and say, Article 85A, but the Constitution is read as a whole. It's not read in portions. The same articles that I am quoting in Article 156, and I actually wanted to read it almost verbatim. It's about appropriation and accountability. You see, there is a bill that will have to be presented on the floor of Parliament every time those budgets have been come up with. And before the money is drawn from the consolidated fund, there must be an approval from the executive. The president himself is in charge, according to the Constitution, of all the monies in that consolidated fund. But then we also have a clerk to Parliament. And the clerk to Parliament, why are you laughing, my brother?
Because I know him.
The clerk to Parliament is supposed to ensure that the processes are succinct.
Nick, I know why you are laughing.
That the processes are succinct. But this didn't happen, and it has not happened. So what we need to do now, we are not lacking in law. We are not lacking also in process. The law is clear on how money should be drawn, on how the management of the process is done, on how bills are supposed to be drawn, and who checks on who. Even the Auditor General has a central role to play as these monies are moving like this from the consolidated fund and going to different accounting officials. So Parliament, at this point, should actually be audited. And yes, the IGG should move in. Investigations should happen. Unfortunately, whether investigations happen or not happen, we've seen in this country that when they investigate corruption, some things are rubbed under the carpet, especially when politics comes to play, and they let the story be. But I don't want to lose hope. I believe that everything that is documented, one day it will come back to the fore, and Ugandans will talk about it whether 40, 50, 100 years from today.
What about Mike Sebalu? Let me come back to you. There was this kind of situation one time in the UK when MPs were picking allowances here and there, and they took a decision to establish what they call they actually call it the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority, which now determines what an MP should earn, how much allowances. Should we go that direction? Borrow from our colonial masters.
I think it is about time, and even in many jurisdictions, people are moving away from, they are creating standard bodies to manage such processes across board. Because even the civil servants, they do work. But why are they not in position to determine theirs? I mean across board. And we are getting to levels which are very disturbing. Because when I go to something like person to holder, when you get to that level, that you come and you negotiate your thing, another one will know how to negotiate his. No. I think that now is below the belt. It goes to levels that are not in conformity with any dignity and decorum.
So you think Noop is right?
But also not in conformity with the laws. Even if we forget about decorum, it's also not in conformity with the laws. You know, they came out and said, the law allows us. That's what they've been saying.
No, because even
they've actually said you can change the law.
The law doesn't allow them. It is a wrong position.
Even the whole idea of sitting to determine your own, where you are the beneficiary, and you alone, not any other, to the level that everyone will negotiate his. Now that goes to levels that are not synonymous with civility.
All right.
I think we can do better.
Let's go for a break now. When we return, we will hear. When we return, we will understand why Mr. Nicholas Opiyo was laughing when the position of clerk to Parliament was mentioned. We'll also hear from Perry, who has been nodding as the other panelists were actually submitting. What is she in agreement with? Are we likely to see things changing in Parliament if we have this investigation done? Should we have a salary review commission which should holistically look at issues of salary and also determine what members of Parliament must earn? Stay tuned, Radio 1 FM 90. Spectrum Extra continues after this break.
Spectrum Extra, Fridays 7 to 9 p.m. on Radio 1 FM 90.
Well, thank you very much for staying with us here on Spectrum Extra, live on Radio 1 FM 90, reviewing the major events of the week. Our spotlight now is on Parliament, where there have been complaints about abuse of public resources following that parliamentary exhibition on X, formerly Twitter, where a number of Ugandans are continuing to discuss even now. Most people have demanded that we should now focus our questions to Parliament as the people's representatives, that people appropriate the national budget. They understand the problem this country is facing, how they abuse public resources the way they have. Those are some of the issues that have been coming on social media. Let's bring in Mr. Nicholas Opiyo. Your view on this subject, and I've seen you closely following on social media this exhibition.
I don't think so. You've seen it. I've taken my time.
I actually saw you giving a cheeky comment about one particular MP was denied a visa. And somebody put there a hashtag parliamentary exhibition. So you're part of it.
Exhibitions are not comfortable things, as many people have realized, that when they shine a light into your activities, it's not comfortable. The NGO sector went through the same exhibition, and the things that came out were not very rosy. Let's just say they didn't come out smelling like a rose. They did the same thing for the Minister of Health, and some women at the helm there nearly undressed in protest. It is not really comfortable. And I think that I'm just being provocative. I think that what's happening to Parliament it's the same thing. It's just not comfortable when people now begin to get the cost of your dress at Suzanne London, the cost of your bra, and they hear that you're buying a piece of dress at £4,000. It's not comfortable. So let's recognize that these fellows are not in a place where they're comfortable. But was it necessary? I think extremely. And I think for me it expresses two things. That it took the outrage of citizens on social media for us to realize the extent of the problem in Parliament. The Auditor General had made similar findings, but that was just swept under the carpet. It shows you how the formal process of accountability...
The Auditor General is an officer of Parliament, if you...
Yeah, but he made a finding that is similar to what is being discussed, and that was swept under the carpet. It shows just how the formal mechanism of accountability is failing. The second thing really is this, that I don't think this would have happened under Jacob Olanya. I don't think this would have happened under previous speakers of Parliament. Really, I don't think so. I doubt it.
Maybe they were happening and we didn't have an exhibition then.
To the extent of that comparison, I think that it's a personality issue. It is also about who is in charge. Okay? That you have opulence and an abuse of processes. Really, it's the case of the tortoise being in charge of the mushrooms. To be honest, just make of it what you will. So I think it's deeply a personality problem. It's about the quality of leadership, the quality. Because leaders have a certain value set about them. That in a country where people are going through these problems, you're buying a piece of dress that you wear for a few hours at £4,000.
Allegedly.
No, I know this for a fact. These stores, if you go to... The store is called Suzanne London. It's where the royal family shops. That store was so proud of our speaker that they even put her picture on their social media platforms. So the price of this cloth is on the website of this high-end shopping store in London. And so it's not allegedly, it's a fact. So seeing people are in poverty and complaining, and you're spending £4,000 on a piece of cloth, and then they see the movement of money, the way that is moving from the clerk to parliament to your driver, clerk to parliament to your personal assistant, clerk to parliament to parliamentary staffers, in the amounts of, in some cases, 100 million on the same day. There is bound to be conclusions that you're abusing public resources for activities that, in some cases, nobody has heard about. Okay? Corporate social responsibility in this district. There's never been anything like that people... If Parliament carried out any activity knowing how obsessed they are with publicity, they would have put a picture on the activity. Nobody knows the activities. And so for me, it's deeply concerning.
Social corporate is also reviewed.
It's also reviewed.
These people are doing what Rotary is supposed to be doing.
But the third thing, really, and I've heard the parliamentary spokesperson, Chris Obore, laboring the point that it is legal. If you don't like it, amend the law. It is not. It is not.
No?
When pressed...
Let me push that.
Can I make my point?
Let the lawyers speak.
Can I make a point?
No, I wanted to actually tell him what they're saying. They're saying that the Parliamentary Commission is enforced by law to actually make decisions
listen, I'm going
that
to make
would
the
help
point.
the institution run better.
If you are patient, you would have had the point. They cite the role of the Parliamentary Commission. Okay? Indeed, the Parliamentary Commission law that they cite is Section 6, Clause D, which says the Parliamentary Commission has the powers to make rules for the well-being of members of Parliament. First question, is this payment a well-being payment, really? Is it a well-being payment? But additionally, what they don't tell you is that Section 13 of the Administration of Parliaments Act requires that in making decisions under Section 6, the Parliamentary Commission must do so in consultation with the Public Service Commission. In this case, did they do that? Let's just, technically speaking, did they do it? No.
Did they follow the law?
They did not. They did not. The payments that are being made to Honorable Mpuga, the other commissioners, are illegal.
Correct.
Period. And I think we've got to answer that. The other argument they are making is that the Parliamentary Commission is self-accounting. The Parliamentary Commission is self-accounting only to the extent of appropriated expenditures. Take the approved budget of Parliament and show me where there was a budget line for corporate social responsibility or for rewarding people for service awards. Grant. Show me. It is not there. It's not there. And so the
Chris was on the show here, and he showed us a line where it was tagged as emoluments for political leaders, something like that.
Yeah, but emoluments of MPs are known. It's also determined by Parliament. It is known.
Because even the question that comes,
and also
when
the rules
did this
of proceeding
award come to? Because if something is budget, it should be known, and it shouldn't surprise anyone.
And the question,
including the beneficiaries.
And the question most people were also asking, why are they being rewarded? That's the other question.
We don't even have to ask why they're being rewarded. It's just no legal basis for it, and I've got to tell Obore he's lying. Okay?
All right.
Because the laws, as I've read it, is the law that they have made. Let them go look at it. The last point really is this. Let's assume this was legal, for argument's sake, that Chris Obore and people in Parliament are right, that this is a legal payment. Is it a morally correct thing to do? Because what is legal may not necessarily be moral. You have a leader of opposition who many people already believed, even before this payment was made, that he was tied at the hip. Metaphorically speaking, of course, is joined at the hip with the leadership of Parliament in ways that undermine the views of the people who sent him to represent them in that place. And then that is compounded by these allegations that without this exhibition, we would never have known about it. Okay? We've never known about it. So it compounds the dilemma, the moral, political dilemma that Honorable Mpuga and the commissioners who sat and appropriated themselves these resources. And I think that we've got to make the point that even if it was legal, it is just not the moral right thing to do. Prudent, public-oriented, public-facing leaders would not do this kind of things at the expense of the taxpayer. The last point is this, that And I've had 2 points just to make and conclude.
Very quickly.
That the money that you're speaking about is peanuts compared to what other government agencies have misappropriated as stealing.
He was sitting right there where you are.
Chris has a difficult job. But I think that to make that argument really is not I think it is even
two wrongs.
It's not even worth
That's what
discussing.
I said. 2 wrongs don't make a right.
It's not worth discussing. That because somebody's stealing more, you being caught in your hands in the till should be excused. It is inexcusable, regardless of what's happening elsewhere, for Parliament to do what they are doing. The last thing they're making is an attempt to deflect. Oh, this is now being funded by the LGBTIQ movement. What nonsense. The LGBTIQ folks in this country have been accused of so many things. And this is the most obscene of them. They are sponsoring the campaign against the speaker because she chaired the House when the law was passed. Absolute gaslighting and an attempt to deflect from the serious issues of their conduct in Parliament. And just because one of the leaders of the exhibition got an award at the US State Department, they're now saying it's also foreign funded. We know the funders, Come on. Look, Ugandans are a little wiser than that. What Parliament has to do, I think, in my view, are 2 things in terms of recommendation going forward. First, the Accountant General must withdraw the accounting office of Parliament. Because he or she, I don't know who she is, has failed in their duty. The Accountant General is in charge of every accounting office across the country.
And that's the clerk to Parliament.
He must withdraw the role of being an accounting officer of Parliament from that individual. He has the power to do so, if they are really concerned about the way money is being appropriated in Parliament. The PPST and the Accountant General must act quickly. When a corruption scandal broke up in the OPM, they removed the Accountant Generals, removed the power of the accounting office assigned to the office of the Prime Minister. We should do this similarly if we are concerned about what we are seeing. The beautiful thing is they don't deny the truth of the fact that they have paid this money to themselves because the documents are not being disputed. The second thing really is that we have to have, because what you're seeing is the tip of the iceberg. And I can tell you, many MPs, if payments to them and trips that they have taken are made public, Ugandans will be very outraged. We have to get to the bottom of this and ask Parliament to give us all this documentation so we can make a judgment. Short of that, I think there has to be investigations into Parliament and its expenditure, Office of the Speaker, Clerk to Parliament, everybody else. It is time now to bear them, to put them bare to the public so we can see. We can see what they've been doing. There's nothing to hide.
All right.
No. I didn't want to go there.
Well, let's hear from Perry.
Something that can be disturbing.
Very quickly, Honorable.
Is something like that happening after the COVID disruption.
Yeah.
I think that is where all leaders should be frugal, trying to fill the gap created by the COVID disruption.
And now religious leaders, I'm waiting to hear from them. They have conspicuously kept quiet.
Well, 2 things for me that have come out of this debate is that public trust in Parliament has actually reduced drastically. At first, we were relying on rumors. Now, when we started seeing documents exhibited, for me, that is what I would call sad for an institution where they are our representatives. Secondly, I think we need safeguards, because when a problem occurs, then you need to think of solutions. Last week I said Kenya has a Salaries and Remuneration Commission. If you Googled how much those members of Parliament and their allowances, it is on Google. So it is important that we learn some of the safeguards that other countries have put in place to try and deal with the issue of abuse of power. The third is, if you look at some legislators, even legislation, parliaments, for instance, even in more developed countries, where we think people are more ethical and whatever, the US has a House Committee on Ethics. That tells you they know that when you're in power, you can be susceptible to corruption. So they have put in place that committee which does orientation, where people are reminded about the importance of public trust in the institution, so that, because when you're appropriating resources for a country and making decisions for the country, you are susceptible to so many, what I would call temptations.
Influence.
Exactly. That's why even the EU Parliament has put in place measures, to safeguard them against, and not only the members, but also their staff. And in this case, you can see what happened, that even the staff were consumed in the corruption. So for me, two things. Salaries.
The staff picking money is a bit distant.
Maybe what they call syndicate corruption.
Exactly.
Collective responsibility.
Okay, so put those safeguards.
Money heist.
Put those safeguards, but for a Ugandan right now, I think we have an election in 2 years' time.
2026.
You mean you're not
2
sure?
years.
This country. One of the things that I would call is, once these exhibitions are made public, for instance, if we know that these people are stealing taxpayers' money, let's get them out of parliament. For real, because those are our representatives. For me, that would be my recommendation, because they are there to represent
Perry,
us.
who is your MP?
My
Where you come from?
Oh, my MP is called... by the way, I live in Kira, so my MP is Honorable Sebalu.
Let's go back to the village.
Yes, in the village.
In the village,
your hometown.
Or something.
Atiku lost the election. Atiku lost the election.
No, Atima.
Jackson
Then
Atima.
you have an opportunity to win an election.
No. For me, it is like get them out. Because if you can abuse your power to that extent, then you're not fit to be a representative.
And for me, every day...
So, in terms of way forward, let us disseminate this information. So that the taxpayer knows how their money is being misused,
Every day you
yet
read
they
the
don't
exhibition.
have access
It's
to
like a
basic
movie, being
services.
acted.
All right, Adam, let's get some comments coming in from you, from the listeners. MPs in Uganda are small gods. They decide their salaries, and the president can't say anything because they can pass a bill that can push him out of power. Magufuli of Tanzania told the MPs that to go for loans if they want vehicles. They can't. Why can't His Excellency Museveni do the same to save this country? That is Mawa Amaza in Moyo West, Moyo in West Nile. Then we have another comment from another person here. Excessive expenditures and misuse of at Parliament. The true fact is that there is a syndicated looting by the Parliament and the Executive. It's evidenced by the supplementary budget and throwing out monies left, right, and centre by the crowded and ballooned Parliament. Absolutely no visible, tangible returns on investing taxpayers' money on that Parliament, which is, in fact, so useless to the Ugandan citizens. Then we have another comment. I am personally getting worried of how our Ugandan Parliament, especially Parliamentary Commission, conducts its business overseeing the institution. Question: if it's a claim of a token given to Honorable Mathias Mpuga Nsamba as a former LOP by Parliament of Uganda, did former LOPs, the likes of senior legislators, Honorable Professor Maurice Ogenga Latigo, Honorable Winfred Kiza, get the same treatment of being appreciated with such monies? That's a question there from that particular listener. I think let the institution of Parliament be thoroughly investigated by the Auditor General. And he says, I think Ugandans needed to be accounted to as taxpayers. We are losing hope in Parliament. That's a comment from Edmond, a political science student who is listening again from Lubaga. We have another comment. Spectrum Extra. On the Parliament's money, it's having a primitive understanding of how benefits of certain offices are enjoyed. That's why some office bearers want to maximize their benefits and privileges of their offices despite the hurt it causes to the country. On Mpuga and his ilk, it's not a surprise. They needed Bobby in 2021, but in 2026 they think they are strong enough to do without him. Nicholas is going personal. Discuss policy and governance, not individualization. Charity mentioned the clerk to Parliament, a very accomplished lawyer, blue-eyed cadre. Centering this on Among is missing the point. There is a crusade of Ugandans hating on Among and Alupo for their own gain. The appointing authority is a wise man. He sees through the scheme. That's a comment from Richard. Our MPs know they are there because they bribed voters. So let's expect nothing else on accountability. In 2008, when Uganda was declared broke, an individual had good amount of money in a foreign bank, and it raised a question. in the US. Well, that's another comment there. Then we have another comment. Hello, Spectrum Extra. What baffles me is even the opposition, whose work is to check the government excesses, the opposition is quiet about the so-called gratuity, because one of their own is at the center of it all. I am imagining if it was some people from NRM, the opposition would shy away, if the opposition would shy away from the discussion. It is an open secret that Parliament and Cabinet connive to siphon taxpayers' money. Well, gentlemen and ladies, there's been this discussion how the legislature and the executive are actually conniving. And, you know, as one other allegation that has featured for the last 2 days, today and yesterday, was the fact that MPs are picking 50 million shillings, allegedly from a supplementary budget which was passed in December last year. They first got 50 million. Now they are again picking 50 million. Are we seeing a situation where the legislature is actually fusing with the executive? And in that context, can we actually talk about a system of checks and balances that Charity strongly talked about, that is envisaged in the Constitution? Charity.
So, can we think about the system of checks and balances?
Can it exist where we have these accusations that the executive is actually in cahoots with the legislature?
You see, the disappointment is for people to try and defend an ill. I think where we need to start is to know that why do we establish laws? It is to set a standard. Because if you have no standard, then you have nowhere to start from. Even in a home, even in a classroom, you set a standard. You say, those who make noise, you'll be required to walk out. You put up your hands, sit down, do this or X, Y. That's the reason, that's the rationale behind the law. So if the law has been put in place and the standard has been set, that if we're going to withdraw money, this is the procedure we follow. Are we following procedures? We are not. Even the executive, yes, has moments when they send supplementary budgets, and the Parliament actually saw a window in what the executive was doing for them to begin to do what they are doing. And that is why I think Chris Obore was calling us to the occasion of saying, look elsewhere as well. But even if he said, look elsewhere, it doesn't take away the fact that there are checks and balances that the Constitution provides for, and those are the safety measures for us as citizens. That's the place where we need to start. We need to look at the rules of procedure and now look at them a bit carefully. Are they in tandem with Article 94 of the Constitution? Because they are supposed to be. If they are not, if there is any loophole in any of those rules of procedure, then we work backwards and ensure that it is consistent with the Constitution as envisaged in that Article 94. Now, the other thing that we need to look at carefully is how are the withdrawals being done without the people who are supposed to authorize them. That's why I was saying I find it difficult to let the Clerk of Parliament off the hook.
An accomplished lawyer,
according to the listener.
Put it to you.
Yes, I find it difficult to leave him.
What was his accomplishment in the legal profession?
This tongue-in-cheek man.
Just a question.
Conclude your point, Charity.
So the whole idea is that I also find it difficult to let the president off the hook. He is the in charge of the consolidated fund, how that money is appropriated, how bills, an appropriation bill is supposed to be presented in Parliament. I find it difficult to let the Ministry of Finance off the hook. So there are so many people who, in line with what the law is expecting, seem not to have known what was going on. So how was it covered up?
All right. Very quickly, 1 minute to each of you as we come to the end of this show. Very quickly, Perry.
I was at the vigil of the late Cecilia Ogwal, and the president is on record saying he knows these MPs in committees, money is exchanging hands. And he actually said the exception to the rule was people like the late Cecilia Ogwal. So he knows. At least I was there. I heard that with my own ears. Now, for me, the question is, is, so what do you do? If you're in charge. And that's why I say, let's throw the baton back to the voter.
All right, very quickly,
And I
Honorable
want
Mike
to thank
Sebalu.
the whistleblowers in Parliament for availing that information to the public.
As we come to the end of the show, Honorable Mike Sebalu.
Although Joel Senyonyi says he has been blackmailed, and he came out to try and clarify things and said, look, at the end of the day, you have to report back to the voter.
All right, very quickly, Honorable Mike Sebalu, as we come to the end of this show.
Yeah, I think we need to come good. Parliament has a responsibility to clear the image. What is out there in the public is not palatable. The kind of amounts and the way they are moving around to people's accounts, to me, I'm yet to believe it is true.
All right,
it's like a movie. It's
like a movie
because the way it is imagined,
Opiyo.
it is really serious, and I think the executive needs to come in, the Ministry of Finance, because if you appropriate money, that means that there may be budget lines that are suffering. Otherwise, where is this money coming from, and being able to do what may not be fundamentally the work of Parliament? So I think the people have made their views known. I think the government, the executive, needs to take this seriously, and we need to see, like the commissioners who sat. I think they owe the country an explanation.
All right,
of how that
Nicholas Opiyo, your closing remarks as we come to the end of this show.
Well, first we must applaud the bravery of the people who are exhibiting this parliamentary thing. Anybody who knows the power of the leaders of the parliament, to the extent that an MP standing to speak must first be grateful, must first bow, lick the feet, lick the arms. Anybody who knows the power...
What else do they leak?
You know, this was a dangerous expedition. The fact that they have braved it, we must thank them. But we must also call upon other
associates. Who are the associates?
The sources notwithstanding, nobody has denied the documents and their bank records. And by the way, I can tell you on good authority, there is more coming. What you've seen is just a few documents. Lastly, let's wish Okotho Chola well in his retirement.
You like Okotho Chola?
You missed the point. You missed the point. Let me say the point.
Hey.
Others say it's an end of an era, E-R-A. Others think it's an end of an era.
All right.
E-R-R-O-I.
With that, we come to the end of Spectrum Extra. Thank you very much, dear panelists, and thank you very much, dear Ugandans, for contributing to this discussion.
Spectrum Extra on Radio 1 FM 90. An extra hour of analysis and discussion on the topical issues of the week. Brought to you by Housing Finance Bank, a financial institution regulated by Bank of Uganda. Housing Finance Bank, we make it easy.
The views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of this radio station or its management.